So you have 1,500 employees here. How many of them do research for you specifically tied to politics, election, what's going to happen? How much are you spending time studying that part of it, since you're saying two things intrigued you in high school, politics and economy and how it's tied to each other? Are you guys focused heavily on studying what's happening in politics as well, regulation, laws, all that, or not really?
We need to. We need to, more so today than we have ever had to.
Why do you say that?
Well, because we're in a period of time which is very much like the late 1930s. There are three main things that exist today and are the biggest forces in what is happening that did not exist before in our lifetimes, but existed in the 1930s, okay? And if you look at history, they repeat themselves. And the first is that there's a very large gap between the rich and the poor, and as a result, a big gap in politics between the left and the right, okay? It's become more extreme, and in this coming election, it will be more extreme, and around the world, it's more extreme. That's why we see the rise in populism, okay? That has very big implications on how the economy will work and how taxes will happen. Let me give an example. The corporate tax cut, which happened, was a big boost for stocks, because you own a stock and they pay less taxes, the stock is worth more, the company's worth more. If there's let's say a Democrat elected, there's a high probability, almost certainty, that would be rolled back.
Sure.
So one of those or another matters, and it matters in a lot of different ways, more than it ever mattered before. So item number one, the wealth gap and the political gap. The second factor, interest rates are close to zero, and the printing of money to buy assets is not as effective. In the old days, in the normal days, if the economy didn't do so well, you'd hit it with a little jolt of stimulation. You'd lower the interest rate, and put some cash out there. You give it a hype, and then it goes, okay? When you get to zero, or close to zero, you can't lower those interest rates. So we're close to that level in the United States. We're at those levels, negative interest rates in Europe, negative interest rates in Japan. That baby ain't going to work anymore. When you try to lower that, in terms of that, won't happen, okay? That's limited. And then what they do is they go out and they print money and they buy financial assets. And that is not working as well, because what happens is when you buy the financial assets, it goes into the hands of who own financial assets. Yeah. Investors. And what they do is they put it into more investments. That notion of putting it into more investments makes those investments go up in price, which is great for the people who have the investments, but not so great for the people who don't have the investments. It widens the wealth gap, and it's its own challenge. And it's not going to be stimulative, and you'll see it. So item number two that didn't exist in our lifetimes before, but did exist in the late 30s, is that. Item number three that exists is that there's a rise of a power to challenging an existing world power.
China.
China rising to challenge the United States. And if you look at through history, when there's existing world powers and there's rising of a challenging power, there is a conflict. There are conflicts. And they've led to wars. In the last 500 years, that's happened 16 times. And in 12 of those times, there were wars. There are 4 types of wars that happen simultaneously. We always think shooting each other and sending people and bodies into wars and that kind of war. But they all have 4 types of wars. They have a trade war. Mm-hmm. They often start with a trade war, 1930s, Smoot-Hawley tariffs. There is a technology war. There is a geopolitical war, like is happening with China. What will it mean for Asia, Asian countries? And there's a capital war. Capital war in all of these cases. So, for example, just recently, the Trump administration said that they're considering shutting off capital to China, a certain flow of capital to China. Well, it's not happened before. You have to go back to World War II. And in World War II, and in a number of wars that other countries have had, They have a capital war, which means that they could say, the Trump administration could say to the Chinese, you know those $1 trillion of bonds that you own? Well, we're not going to pay you, or we're going to do this or that. These types of wars, and how does money flow between countries?
Though, Ray? Who needs who more?
I'll digress into that, but I just wanted to make clear that at number 3, so these are factors.
Sure.
1, wealth and political gap, extreme. Number 2, monetary policy can't, so if we have a downturn and they're at each other's throats, serious. Number 3, the conflict with China. These things have played out. Now when you ask how do you play the game in China, US, that's a conversation, but I just wanted to clarify the nature of the dynamic.
That's powerful. But
So now when you look at why is politics more important today than it was? Because that will determine in the markets what will happen in the markets and the economy, right? And number 1, that wealth gap, who you elect will have a big economic and market impact.
Tremendous.
Number 2, the absence of monetary policy will have a big market impact as to what will be done. And number 3, this geopolitical war, which involves those 4 things, technology and so on, will have a big impact. So that's why it's more important than ever.